thank you for staying with Daybreak. We're still talking about elections integrity. And Madam Anna, is coming to you. How then do we strengthen these institutions to give them more teeth, like Steve is saying?
I think one, Trevor, is we must be deliberate about any reforms. As I mentioned, we have a raft of legal reforms that have been fronted, not just recently, but from 2013, 2017, and they were anchored even on what the Kriegler Commission, for example, on elections did state. The challenge has been, why do we then wait until too close to the election? Because then that does not give the institutions time to even test and pilot a number of the recommendations you're giving. So you'll give an example of the Campaign Financing Act. Yes, it's there in law, but in terms of operationalizing it, you need regulations, you need implementation framework. Are 12 months sufficient for that? So one, we have got to be serious about making sure that we are not introducing reforms too late in the day. Secondly, is to deliberately then also equip the key institutions, the NCIC, EACC, IEBC. If you talk to the institutions, one of the challenges they're having is, of course, funding. And we do agree that as a country, we have been having a sort of recession even before COVID, and COVID expounded it. But then when we look at the budget, and the recommendations or the targets that have been given to us and revenues raised as a country, are we then taking deliberate steps knowing that we are 12 or 24 months towards a general election to give the key institutions the necessary funding? Because funding is very important. So at the end of the day, what you'll find, which is sadly the case, is there's a lot of last-minute helter-skelter running. This needs to be amended. We need to push for this. Mass voter registration is something that we have not spoken about. If you look at the number of children, for example, who will be new voters, young people since 2017, how much time is sufficient for us to have a good voter registration exercise, voter verification exercise? Remember, people want to check their particular details. Then we also need to be deliberate and equip the IBC on matters, especially election technology. We know what crucial role that plays. So I think for us to have faith in the institutions, one is to deliberately equip them, push for the reforms that are necessary. I think at this point in the day, what we are now talking about is, unfortunately, minimum reforms. There is a whole raft, but in view of time, we can only perhaps isolate the low-hanging fruits or the things that we must have as opposed to what we ideally wanted. But then secondly is also the narrative that as citizens we need to consume, that we give faith to NCIC, to IEBC, to EACC, so that they're able to execute their functions and to have support towards them. As you've heard, there are countries where these institutions enjoy the greatest confidence. And yes, I do agree confidence is a process, but it starts with the narrative shaping, the perceptions we have, so that then we are able to interact more with them, to understand the work that they do and how crucial they are to the democratic process. So that's important. But thirdly, I think, and from where we sit now that we have a new head of the judiciary, is to strengthen the dispute resolution mechanisms, both within the parties and outside the parties. So if we are looking at political parties, the PPDT itself, and also the JC, that's a Judicial Committee on Elections, have Kenyans interacted with these institutions to understand the role they play. Because at the end of the day, credibility and integrity is also in as far as if as I go to a nomination and I lose fairly, I may not be happy with the result, but that instills confidence and credibility in the process. So we have got to interrogate all these institutions, but sadly now we don't have time. So we must rush very quickly, isolate what's priority, and ensure that, for instance, we expect soon we start with the IBC commissioners' vacancies that are filled in, then we have a full house, reconstitute whether there are certain departments within IBC that need to be validated in terms of substantive heads, and then move to other institutions, bearing in mind that even with the Parliament, National Assembly and Senate, soon they'll go on recess. So if we're looking at amendments in terms of legal reforms, what can they do right now before time is late and they have to go on recess? So it's deliberate efforts. And the thing is, with Kenyans, we've seen where we need to coalesce and where we need to be deliberate. We actually do that. So the question is why then on election matters, we tend not to be as serious as such.
Okay. And you've been dealing with this a lot, Dr. Makori. Why then is it that on election matters Kenyans are not very serious? Is it the ethnic balance? What happens? And I know you've been trying to figure this out.
I don't know how to define seriousness. They're serious and not serious. for Kenyans take elections and politics as a matter of life and death. I was in Lusaka the other day with Commerce Early Warning Systems regarding our elections. As a matter of fact, we're going back to monitor, to be observers for the election in August. I hope maybe I'll see you there. Yeah. A month to elections, the general elections, even on news, you don't know there's elections in that country. There's no posters, people are not talking about anything. There's a soberness to this, you understand? So for us, we like the specter of politics and elections. It's entertaining. You look at the papers today morning, look at the headlines every single day. It has to be about a political figure or political process, for that matter. Even here, for you to get good ratings, for people to watch your show, if you bring a very serious topic here, people will tune off. But talk about politicians, believe me, everybody wants to watch and everybody's going to tweet. You understand? So we like the specter, and I'm reminded of a verse, and I'm going to call this, oblige me to do this. Yeah. In Jeremiah, I think Jeremiah 5, where it says, run to see whether anybody's doing right. Yeah. And then it talks about the injustice in Jerusalem, the murder, the wickedness of leaders, of the false prophets. And it ends by this, I think, in verse 1. It says, this continues because my people love it so. Why is there injustice and wickedness? Why? Because my people love it so. So for me, the seriousness that we have is only on the specter of enjoying and looking at the drama of politics. But it comes to understand the gravity of decision that we are making, that the person you are electing can dramatically affect or change your life for that matter. We don't take that seriously. Yeah. So it's a dog and pony show, as we said. It's a circus. Yeah. So the seriousness is only in watching it and reading the latest tabloid stories about who's done what and who hasn't what. But in terms of their life taking, you know what? The person I choose, the president I choose, the fiscal policy that they will enact, the monetary policy they will act, will drastically change their lives. Now, then we start complaining 2 months after we have elected the leader of how bad the economy is. Well, guess what? You elected the leader. Yeah. So the spectacle that we see and enjoy, to me, is dangerous. So for me, I would prefer, and especially if you go to other foreign countries, the democratic process is a sacred process. Yeah. There's gravity towards it. So some things we need to get serious about as a people. Yeah. And for us especially, we're really working hard on voter sensitization in civic education to show them that, you know what, the power is with you. You can determine your destiny based on the election, rather the leader that you elect or vote for, either at the grassroots level, whether it's your MCA, your governor, up to the highest level in the country. Last but not least, Trevor, I think for the reality, we need to speak the truth also. We don't have party primaries. It's a sham. You understand? It's a sham. So a few people control our democratic process, not institutions, as she has said. You see, if we empower institutions, we keep, there's a check and balance to it. The institution becomes strong. We saw what happened in the US just the other day. And if it wasn't for the strong institutions they have, as when these guys are mounting an insurrection in the capital, that country is going to go down. So for me, I would say this, is a few people control the levers of power in the democratic process. Yeah. We need to actually empower institutions. By law, one, but more importantly, less on funding. I mean, I can tell you, I mean, you give us, if you look at our budget, it just meets our recurrent, that's it. Yeah. Yet we have a whole country to do voter mass sensitization. I mean, it's billions, you know that. For you to do this constantly, you go to the ground and be preventive, because the challenge we have, as far as, for example, the ACC Act, and Council can confirm, it is not preventive. You understand? It's diagnostic. After the problem is when it tells you there's a problem with this person, investigate this person. Yeah. And then say, you know what, hey, you need to be preventive and stop the problem before it becomes. So now what our preventive measure is engaging the citizens, going to the grassroots. That is expensive. But guess what? When an institution does what it's supposed to do, the ACC, ABC, NCIC, there's a punitive aspect when it comes to certain things. If you touch somebody, if you do what is right, you'll be punished. How? By your funds being withdrawn. You're not going to be funded. Yet you're doing your legal mandate, constitutional mandate. And that's the reality of the country that we're facing right now.
Yeah. And I'd like you to talk about that reality more. Is there a chance that the high and mighty still somehow control institutions that are supposed to be independent?
See, if you want to know if there's control, is when somebody does something wrong. Oh, sorry, let me see. If you does what it's supposed to do, right? And then there's a backlash, and there's a threat of defunding that institution. You understand? Because for the most part, let me just say this: for the most part, because I engage with some of the constitutional commissions, I can tell you for the most part, they're independent. And independence is in operation. We need to understand independence, Trevor.
Yeah.
Especially in government circles. Independence is supposed to be on operations. But on policy, to an extent, you still have to enact the policies of the administration that appointed you.
Yeah.
You understand? So it's in terms of operations. So the challenge you have is the fact that, and it's in reality, you do what you're supposed to do, and then there's a punitive aspect. Now, and it's a flip side. And you see somebody also doing what they're supposed to do and being blamed that you being used by the state. You see that a lot also. And they just, and is it an issue of the time of investigation or arrest? Yeah, we can argue that. Yeah. But if somebody has done something wrong, they need to be arrested and prosecuted, investigated and prosecuted. So institutions, us in the law enforcement, you're kind of tied, because when you do something, you're told you're at the behest of powers that be. When you don't do something, well, you're told, well, you're not doing what you're supposed to be. Yeah. So back to what they've said, we should be just given the space to work. Yeah. Okay? If we step on some toes, as far as referring the law, let us do it, because that's the law of the country. We must protect. We swear an oath as a state officer to uphold the Constitution. So that's something we must do regardless of who you step or not. Okay.
Yeah. Ogolla, is that where the problem is? There's the independence, and then there's the codependence, whereby in as much as you're an independent institution, you still depend on the same people you're supposed to check and balance, to allocate funds and all that. Therefore, you have to sort of toe the line.
No, we have a sophisticated system of governance, but it's just that we don't appreciate the interdependence that the Constitution has ordained, and we have not respected it, because interdependence does not mean domination. Yeah. Interdependence means preserving what you may consider as a interbranch or interinstitutional committee, respect for each other and courtesy. If EACC needs funds, yeah, you have to give them funds without trying to influence or dominate it. If NCAC needs funds, you have to give them funds because they're performing constitutional and statutory functions, yeah, despite, even if the reports they generate don't favor you, and that we have not respected that kind of dichotomy. We tend to think that funds should follow some level of patronage. So if you can't patronize you, we can't control you, we will deny you funds until you come round. Mm-hmm. But let me make a proposal concerning political party, revamping the political party institutions. I was listening to Anne and I was looking at what the law says. Right now, if you want to ensure electoral reform, probably after this election, Trevor, after the election, because the time is too short to implement this, but in the next electoral cycle, which begins immediately, the IBC gazettes the results of the 2022 election. We need to enhance, make the most stringent the requirements for registration of political parties. If you look at Section 7 of the Political Parties Act, it says a very low threshold that anybody, including myself, can register a political party. It just says you need 1,000 members of the political party drawn in at least half of the counties. Just 1,000 in 24 counties. It's a low target. Mama Mboka can achieve that. It means with just 24,000 people, because it's 1,000 times 24 counties, 24,000 people, you can have a political party. If we enhance that requirement to a third of the registered voters in that county, most of these political parties will fold up. Then you'll have, by design, by legislative design, you'd have 2 or 3 large political parties. But so far, with this requirement, you can see why you can have 1,000 political parties. I'm not necessarily persuaded you need to have more than 3 or 4 political parties, because if you have less, then you go to the next issue. Yeah. The next issue is funding. Within Section 23 of the Political Parties Act, the national budget reserves 0.3% to our political parties, for 0.3% of the national budget to go to political parties. If we have fewer parties, drawing membership to the tune of, to the level of a third of registered voters in every county, in at least more than half of the counties, then you can also enhance the budget from 0.3, which is a drop in the ocean, to 30, maybe even 15%.
Yeah.
15% of national budget going to strengthen political parties, then you will have a huge relief. Because as it is, Trevor, and I want to sympathize now with political leaders, party leaders. You know, you come from the private sector, Trevor, and you want to run on ODM. Do you know how ODM has been managing its affairs? Do you know who has been funding it? Do you know who has been popularizing it? You can't tell people you want to walk in freely and benefit from the fruits of someone's labor. They will control the space. They will give you a ticket based on what they think about you. And what they think about you means, do you have the capacity to buy that ticket? But if you fund political parties and you oversight that fund properly, you take away the control on the influence of party leaders they have on those parties.
Yeah.
But right now, parties are being funded privately. Party leaders, you know, you heard, for instance, in Kiambaa, there was allegation that the UDA reserved up to 200 million for the campaigns. Why should I give you 200 million for campaigns if I don't know you, if I'm not sure about your loyalty? At that time, where's the national government? Where's the treasury? Where's all these institutions to say, hey, listen, we will fund candidates? Can we increase party funding?
Yeah.
And then with that, we can then depersonalize political parties. The condition for funding political parties, the law says, is just 3% of the votes. If you garner at least 3% of the votes cast in the preceding election, then you may qualify for political party funding. Very few parties actually get 3%, and even those that get 3% of the national votes cast still only get 0.3 of the national budget, which means to have political party activities running throughout the 5-year period, they will need to rely on external sources. Some of these external sources come back last minute to harvest the proceeds of their investment. If I'm a private sector investor and I've been pumping money in Jubilee or Oda, of course, Trevor, towards the election, I'll come and tell you it's now time to harvest my fruits of my labor.
Yeah.
I will get the ticket regardless of my moral and ethical fitness. You see the dilemma? I think where we are right now, if you want solutions, we start with the law first.
Yeah.
How do we strengthen the law to bring us as close as possible to the ideals the Constitution has anticipated? Once we reform that, and I agree with Anne, if you're struggling to reconstitute IBC, honestly, Trevor, I mean, this is a country totally lacking in seriousness. Just moral conversation. 12 months to election, you don't have a commission that is fully constituted. It is not IBC's fault. It is the president's fault. We said this, the law is very clear. I have read IBC Act as amended. Look at Section 7A of the IBC. What does it say? And the first paragraph of the first schedule, the Act, it says, if a commissioner resigns within 14 days, Trevor, the president must gazette the vacancy. Within another 14 days, appoint a selection panel. What has the president done 3 years later, since the 3 commissioners resigned? It's only Commissioner Kombe who resigned midway an election, and within the meaning of Article 136 of the Constitution, the president was disbarred from doing anything because that was still electoral period. I think the president failed the country in terms of reconstituting. No, Anne said, oh, no, 12 months election, no, no. But who has been responsible for it?
Yeah.
It's the president. It is the president within the law. We have to say so with a lot of respect. I love Uhuru Kenyatta. He's my president. I wish him well until his last day in office. But insofar as the reconstitution of IBC is concerned, he failed us. Again, IBC, you may not be aware, but lawyers are aware. IBC attempted to undertake boundaries review. They did. Fact of the matter is this. IBC presented proposals to Treasury. What did Treasury say? Boundaries review takes place between 8 to 12 years. We will consider this a priority after the election. Who is Treasury to micromanage IBC? But when BBI comes and says we want to expand and create 70 constituencies, now money is made available. I think that is where, you want to blame. Let us be sympathetic to our institutions. Our institutions are still not financially independent the way we would want them to be because there's a lot of back-end manipulation and frustration. You don't expect IBC, ESCC, NCIC, to come out and say, hey, listen, because of respect for each other, what we call interbranch committee, mutuality, courtesy between offices.
Yeah.
You know, me, I can call out the executive, because I'm in the private practice. I don't hold public office. But he sits at NCIC. It is discourteous for Daktari here to sit on this show and openly castigate the president, even if he's unhappy with the president. You get? Yeah. These back-end processes need to be exposed so that when you are pushing blame, we know where they lie.
Okay.
But we can look at the law. Yeah. The law gives us some certain minimum. Can we enhance the minimum, the threshold? Yeah. Then now we work from there going forward. All right.
Madam Mireri, where do we draw the line on the independence and interdependence? That is where the problem is here.
I think, Trevor, as has been mentioned by both my colleagues, is sadly we perceive patronage being rewarded and non-patronage being punished. I think we need to have that candid discussion, and as Steve has said, the buck stops with one person, and that one person is His Excellency the President. And sadly, especially when it comes to matters legal reform, where it has come to matters in national institutions, we've not been able to see that really compliance in terms of the law. A good example is even the 2/3 rule, where the Chief Justice Emeritus did give his position when he was leaving office. They're actually legally, as a country, we're having an unconstitutional parliament in session. So when we have such landmark, whether they are huge discussions or even in terms of compliance to the law, we need His Excellency the President to come out strong, and it's not too late in the day. He can still have a legacy where he's able to show that he's been able to comply with the law. And secondly, even in terms of advisory opinions, whoever it is that is tasked to advise him needs to come out very clear, because one, it also avoids what we deem as embarrassments in terms of the law, where the law is very clear on what needs to happen. Then the President is advised in the alternative, and you go to court and you see the outcome does not favor the presidency. So we need to be very clear on that. Now, coming back to what you have indicated, Trevor, in terms of dependency and interdependency, at the end of the day, and I like what Commissioner said, the Constitution is very clear on the sovereignty of the people, which means even resources that we raise as a country, whether through taxes, whether through income generation, do not belong to the exchequer. He's actually there as a manager. So we need to be very clear, even as institutions, and it's not only the key institutions we've seen, even other commissions, such as human rights commissions, we know that even when they go to seek funding, depending on what they have said about the government, there is an element of punishment in terms of slashing the budget. That should not happen. Because at the end of the day, we need to look at it that today it's a current office bearers, but if we make it a practice, tomorrow we could have a tyranny that could actually even be worse. It's about fidelity to the Constitution. Resources follow functions. So we need to be very clear. What are the functions of these institutions? Can we properly fund them? And that does not depend on whether that commission is deemed or deemed to be patronizing you or not. It's simply about the functions that are constitutional, that are given to independent commissions and institutions. Thus, the Treasury needs to honor that and be able to allocate funding based on that.
All right. Yeah. Commissioner, there's a tweet here from Agenda. It says, we need to ensure that the electoral system is not rigged in favor of ethically unfit candidates. Is that where our issue is, our ethnic arithmetics? Because you have also dealt with this. When somebody says something in terms of hate speech, and then you come and flag it, but they tell you in my language the implied meaning is not what you guys think it is.
Actually, we are amending our act so as to you to add this conversation, because we know the challenges of our act. We are amending it. At one of the amendments, one of the article amendment is actually that coded language, because it was never there. Because you take somebody to court, and they'll say, well, in my language, this is exactly what it means. So we are adding that, and it will be very structured in how it will be prosecuted, because I think it's important, because that's what happened, especially in Rwanda, when you talk about cockroaches. Yeah. You can say I was talking about actual cockroach, but we ought to know who you meant by like a cockroach. In the larger context of that question, it's unfortunately the reality in the ground, and just how it is. Because there are certain regions in this country, because of the ethnic makeup, that a candidate will be elected, whether we say it or not, whether we flag it or not, whether IBC elects it or not, because of just the ethnic makeup of that region.
Yeah.
It's a reality. Now, unfortunately, the people who suffer the most are the people of that ethnic group. You understand? So they elect a leader because so-and-so belongs to my ethnic group. But if you go to these regions, they're underdeveloped, there's zero infrastructure, there are poor roads, there's no schools, yet they elected somebody from their own ethnic group. So with this conversation now, we're having people on the grassroots because as I think it's been said here, we know the track record of these people.
Yeah.
So actually, we actually make it now even as practical second. In the last 5 years, we elected this person because in this county, and actually what we are seeing actually, in Kenya, we have the big tribes, right? And then within the big tribes, we have small tribes which are marginalized. Now, what is funny is in counties, let's say Bungoma, you find because of the ethnic makeup, the marginalized group or ethnic group now marginalizes the majority who in this county are the minority.
Yeah.
Okay? Across the board, almost every single county in this country, very few countries are really pragmatic in how they choose their leaders.
Yeah.
Now, if you go to, I can go to constitution by constitution, constitution by constituency, not even forget about county, whereby this has happened. And you look at the track record of these individuals, because you chose them on the issue of ethnicity. These are people who are dangerous, first of all, for the country, national security. They're insightful, okay? We've flagged it, we've said it, we've called them out. Now, in the 5 years, now we are now on the ground. We say, listen, this is what have they done? How many schools do you have? What are the roads conditions? So I think that is bringing consciousness, they're awakening consciousness to the people. But the reality of the ground is that. But you'll see whether it's Bungoma, whether it's Kilifi, depending on the majority of the ethnic makeup of this county, regardless of the moral stance of that candidate or ethical stance of that candidate, they will be elected. Now, I don't think we are powerless. I think we still must continue to do what we're supposed to do. You know, we don't want to be fatalistic here and say, you know, it is what it is. No, we must always continue. We press on, and that's why we have this multi-agency task force with ORPP, especially we're tasking them. And that is why, for example, even for us in TSC, our first symposium is with I think 13 parties, the main parties in the country, 13 of the big ones. And having the discussion, the council has said, challenging them, calling them out publicly in the setting that we have, and challenging them because we have to do something. Now, are we going to get to where we're supposed to be as a country? Probably not now, in terms of institutions being strengthened. Yeah. But at least you can do something. If you think your act is weak, and acts sometimes limit us, and for us it has, for a long time, you choose to amend it. And it's not an easy task because actually that day, we were in a meeting and I think the president was challenging us, saying, you know what, you want to give them more powers, okay, to keep in check the people who are actually the biggest violators of this. I mean, I don't think they're going to grant you that. And that's the reality of where we are. Yeah. But I think I trust God that we'll be able to push our amendments. I mean, they will be radical. The powers that we seek, I think, will be so that now we can actually be preventive. We can actually do what we're supposed to do, given our mandate, so that nobody can complain. And we can not be held accountable because we'll have the legal mandate, and the funding should be there, so that now we can come and tell, now you're not doing your job as an institution. Because as you said, I think what you said is so true. I can't belabor his words anymore. Yeah. Because if you are in oppositions, believe me, we're in always very difficult positions. Doing what is right, yet you understand that it will undermine your institution overall because you have a mandate for the whole country. Yeah. So if I don't have funds to go to Marsabit to do peace process, Marsabit is going to ban. Then you tell me I'm not doing my job. But because I did something that somebody wasn't too happy about, then I don't have funds to do peace work. Yeah. It must have been. It's just a reality.
Yeah. But that also is another reality because as you're trying to amend that act, what the president said is actually true. You're trying to get more powers to control the same people you expect to allow that amendment to happen because you can't push it on your own.
Yes.
So that balance is, you don't have the cards. You're not holding the cards at all. So essentially, they can still water it down a bit, tweak it here and there. Of course. To ensure that there's not much you can do.
As they do, and they will do. I mean, we saw this debate when we're talking about education qualification. We saw the debate. I mean, the biggest people who are saying, hey, you know what, we need academic credentials are the people actually in Parliament. But I think this is what I'll say this to be pragmatic and real. Because we've had discussions with key leadership in the House and even most of the members of Parliament and in the Senate. What we are saying to them is, first of all, as we said here, you'll be not forever in power. You'll not be forever in power, Trevor. I think they forget that. And you will need an institution that will protect you. Because one day you will be the so-called victim.
Yeah.
You will need a judiciary that is independent. You will need a EFCC that is independent, that does not come to which hunt you because the person in power doesn't like you.
Yeah.
You understand? You will need people like us in the law enforcement actually to protect you. So I think we are aligning the numbers slowly and having this very candid, pragmatic conversation with them. And let me also be frank, because sometimes we demonize politicians too much. You know, in reality, Trevor, majority of them are decent people to an extent. They're reasonable. You just have a few hardliners, as always, and then they shout the loudest, they make the loudest noise, and they seem they have control. So for me, from a practical perspective, it's certainly pushing these amendments. And as much as engaged with the leadership in the House and Senate, you have decent people. And I think we can, for the most part, get 80% of what we need in terms of enacting our laws so that we can have enough powers actually to make sure the country stays united and then cohesive.
Okay. Steve, there's Jasper Mogire here. Says interdependence, codependence, blah, 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 is meant to mask out our dishonesty. What Kenya needs, like last week, is an adherence to the existing law, period. But we enforce our laws for political reasons, and that won't change even if we are given the U.S. Constitution. Is there selective implementation of the law?
No, I think let's for the benefit of that viewer, let me explain what independence and interdependence means. Maybe I can use NCSC as an example.
Yeah.
Independence means that NCSC has the functional and decisional autonomy to operate without looking behind their shoulders and who is watching, who is controlling, what is someone else thinking about it. And it also means that we must respect that decisional and functional autonomy. Just because we can frustrate it does not mean we frustrate it. We must respect the autonomy the Constitution and the law confers to NCSC. Interdependence means government is sophisticated and networked. You cannot work in isolation. You necessarily need to rely on other agencies for you to be able to fulfill your mandate. So interdependence has a lot to do with what we call institutional committee and courtesy and mutuality. They sound a bit technical, but I think we can courtesy, I can explain what courtesy means. Yeah. Courtesy means, in a family setting, if your wife does something which is unacceptable, you don't call her out in public. You can have time later and, converse in your bedroom where the kids are not there. Yeah. That's what courtesy is all about. It's not like parents don't do things that children find objectionable or their partners find objectionable, but they don't fight before the children. Yeah. I heard the CJ talking about Parliament and the executive and the judiciary taking each other to court, and they say it's not like a father taking a son to court. People missed the point. Yeah. People said, oh, okay, so you are saying that the judiciary is the child and the executive is the father. No. Yeah. She was trying to use a simple and straightforward example that all of us can relate with. It means that when you're in a position, when you're in a state of public office, you have to be mindful about the unintended consequence. That's what respect is all about, of your actions and statements. You have to be mindful. And you have to be slow to castigate your co-equal. All constitutional commissions and public agencies are on the same platform. They form what you may consider as the fourth arm of government. These are expert commissions. EFCC is an expert commission. NCSC is an expert commission. It has a specific mandate. Yeah. We must trust it to deliver that mandate. But as it does so, it needs the other. That is what independence and interdependence means. But let me pick up from what Dr. Ali said. I think when he talks about disruption of the political conversation that is steeped in our culture, why people will continue voting along ethnic lines, that ethnic solidarity, Trevor, is a tool for political propaganda. Propaganda sells sells faster than the truth.
Yeah.
And propaganda is easy to mobilize people around propaganda. You just have to say it. So you watched the news yesterday on Citizen TV. They said, Dr. Oburu Odinga was asking Mount Kenya leaders, what has Raila ever done to you? You know, because in the last 50 years, they have been told Raila Odinga is unelectable, he's a dangerous man.
Yeah.
It's just propaganda. And in Luo Nyanza, voters have been told, unless Baba gets this thing, you will never know what liberation really is. Your liberation as a community rests with Baba. Do you want, if for Baba to get this thing, Baba needs an army, a trusted army of MPs and senators and governors. If you deny Baba, the governor, you have taken his shirt away. You deny him the MP, you've taken the trouser away. You deny him the senator, you've taken the... Do you want Baba to walk naked? Do you want Baba to walk naked? They said, no. Baba, please be fully dressed, be equipped. Be equipped. Be armored so that you can go and win the war. So that is propaganda. You know, I listen to it, I laugh. I'm like, wow, we are doing so well in terms of propaganda, only comparable to the US. And that's why I said voters are not necessarily sophisticated. Voters don't like heavy conversations. They like light conversations. That's why, you know, euphoria and fanatism works well.
Yeah.
Euphoria works because it can mobilize votes. Right now, the hustler narrative is a very, very attractive narrative, regardless of its merits and demerits. It's very, very attractive because it resonates well with the common mwananchi who is struggling and is burdened by huge taxes.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what Uhuru Kenyatta is doing as government. If the mwananchi is feeling burdened by taxes and life, the cost of living has gone up, my goodness, the hustler narrative is such a huge relief. It will be a rallying point. I think the idea is not to attack it per se.
Yeah.
Yes, we can talk about it, but we have to understand that it's really, really layered. I come from Ugenya. I was born and raised in Ugenya.
Yeah.
But my parents are originally from Alego. Do you know to date, the Wazes insist on calling me Jalego, son of Alego. I'm like, what do you mean? I don't even know where Alego is.
Yeah.
There's a constituency called Alego constituency. I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
Trevor, I don't know where Alego is. But they will tell you, Alego. I'm like, but I'm Ugenya, like, rest here.
Yeah.
You know, at that lower level, clanism is deep. Clanism projected on a national platform becomes ethnic solidarity or ethnicity.
Yeah.
The conversation is, let us make fun of those things. Tell them, listen. I mean, I find it fun. You call me Jalego when I'm raised here. But anyway, let Jalego work. Don't use it as a tool, just convert it. There's something called reframing conversation.
Yeah.
Let us reframe our conversation and let voters know that as long as we have strong institutions at the top, as long as power and resources are dispersed at the top, it does not matter that the party leader has huge numbers of elected MPs from his ethnic community, because they will not be able to increase the funding that goes to the constituency, because how funding is disbursed is a very, very structured and layered way, and it's a predictable pattern to it. I think that is what we need to drive the conversation to.
All right. Let's bring up the feedback on this, and then I'll take roll doing remarks from my guests here. Let's see what you're saying on Twitter. And Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, use the hashtag Daybreak. Let's bring it up and see what is on this discussion. Peter Oduor says integrity in leaders refers to being honest, trustworthy, and reliable. Leaders with integrity act in accordance with their words, i.e. they practice what they preach and own up to their mistakes, as opposed to hiding them, blaming their team, and masquerading. Okay. Thiongo Mwangi says IBC must reject candidates without integrity. It's not voters' role to reject the candidates with integrity issues. IBC has been given that role by the Constitution and the law. Okay? Let's see what else is saying. Engineer Lazaro says integrity tests should begin right from the party nominations. Political parties should be penalized in case of forwarding the names of tainted with the corruption and other serious crimes like instigating tribal animosity. Okay? Okelo Mwalimu says the word integrity only exists in the Constitution. We sing chapter 6 in between elections, but on election day, we kill, bury it, and perform its rituals by voting in the most corrupt, the ones who forged academic papers and the ones who bribe the voters the most. Okay. All right. Madam Man, I'll take closing remarks from you. Where do we go from here? Where do we start?
Thanks, Trevor. I think for me, 4 things stand out.
Yeah.
One, we must remember as Kenyans, sovereign power belongs to us. So we have every power, everything that is required to implement Chapter 6 of the Constitution in terms of integrity. And we do that every day in the people we associate with. We rarely say, I want to deal with this person of questionable character or someone who's known to be, for example, a thief. At personal level, you're very careful about the circle you select. So we have everything that's required as a people to implement Chapter 6 of the Constitution. However, let's look at now elections in terms of integrity. It's important and crucial to the process. And let's remember, election is a process. It's not an event.
Yeah.
And for us to achieve that, let's strengthen the institutions that are supposed to help us achieve the integrity, the IEBC, the NCIC, the EACC. But on the flip hand, let's also question where certain institutions might be used in a manner that's not integrable, if there's such a term. So even looking at institutions such as the National Police Service, the Ministry of Interior, we need to question, especially in terms of election process, how are they being used? Ultimately, the choice is with us as Kenyans. Yeah. Let's be able to question candidates regardless of their ethnic formation, regardless of where they come from, regardless of whether they're a woman or a man, a youth or a person with disability. It's about the choice you want in a leader. Who would you want to best reflect you as a person? Yeah. So let's use that at the ballot, and let's start before the ballot. Let's question and vet everyone who presents themselves, and thereafter, let us continue to hold them to account. I think as Kenyans, we imagine the vote ends on the D-Day. Yeah. We never then take our role as citizens seriously to even question their transparency and accountability in terms of them representing us. So let's be clear as Kenyans. Let's own up. Let's not pass the baton to anyone else, because it starts and ends with us as Kenyans.
Before I let you go, I wouldn't let you go without asking about Kiamba.
Yes.
What is ELOG's position and what happened in Kiamba?
I think in Kiamba, as ELOG, we did observe a number of issues. We did issue our presser. But for us, I think what we are very clear about as a country is, one, on the flip side, the positive is that citizens, as I mentioned, Trevor, are becoming more aware. They know what needs to happen. They know how to call out right for right and wrong for wrong. Increasingly, we are seeing the role of a political party coming out very strongly. But thirdly, and that's why we say we need to question, especially when it comes to our Ministry of Interior, the role that police officers play, and even local administration. I think in Kiamba we did see in a certain classrooms chiefs who were really in full regalia next to a polling booth, and it's citizens who call that out. So what we like is that, one, we did see concession in terms of the process. There was no violence as such, which is a good step. I think that's how we need to move forward. Yes. I think there's a candidate who felt they were not happy with the process and they'll want to go to court. That is what we want to encourage. At the end of the day, violence has no place in our politics. If you're unhappy with an outcome, there are mechanisms and institutions that you can lodge that with. So for us, I think we are getting it right. We did like that the IBC was especially very clear on what we are referring to as a super agents, because in the past we have seen that's where the trouble starts. And then secondly, being very clear in terms of the tallying process and the role of the presiding officer and the returning officers being really in charge of their area. So we are seeing good lessons, and these are lessons that we can say have been drawn from Sambweni, from Juja, from Bonchari, that then were played out in Kiamba. So we hope that even as we get into the general election, we can take tabs of a lot of those lessons for the positive, and where amendments need to be done, let them be done in good time.
Did you see any irregularities?
Irregularities were there and they were pointed out. There were, one, a lot of voter names that were in the wrong hands, and citizens did call that out. But secondly, we did see a lot of compliance. So where the irregularities, for example, either in the tallying of the results or the presentation of the results, the IBC was very good at involving the chief agents of each party to resolve that dispute. Okay. Because you have to be alive that disputes, even at the counting process, will take place. It's about then, have we equipped the chief agents and the IBC officials to amicably resolve that issue? Okay. So that is what we saw.
All right.
Thank you.
Dr. Makori, closing remarks?
I think mine is going to be simple, and I think she took away my words. I believe in a principle called personal responsibility.
Yeah.
And when you take personal responsibility of your decisions, you actually are in control of your life for the most part. I won't blame Trevor for this and that. If I'm late, I am late. I would say it's traffic. I didn't get out of my house on time. I maybe overslept. Maybe I just didn't manage my time. But we're always blaming something for our wrongs. And it begins with, I think, individual responsibility and collectively now as a society. Yes, are there things that should be done? Absolutely. We talk about reforms. They should and must happen. But I'll just close on that. And I'll always close on personal responsibility, because it's my responsibility to do the right thing. It's my responsibility to refrain from doing the wrong thing. Yeah. It's my responsibility to refrain from being incited, for example. It's my responsibility to choose the right candidate. So I think when we embrace personal responsibility, you hear oftentimes a lot, especially in news circles, whenever there's a problem, somebody has lost a child or there's a disaster, there's this phrase Kenyans like using, ninaomba serikali. It is like COVID, ninaomba serikali, and in a mature society, that is never the case, because you ought to, or we ought to be in a place to do that. So for me, I will emphasize on personal responsibility. Secondly, I just want to thank my colleagues and even you for this conversation. Believe me or not, this conversation changes things, Trevor. When we have this kind of conversation, when we have these contributions here, we are elevating the discourse. The narrative is changing slowly by slowly. What you're doing here is public sensitization. So it's helping. So I want to thank you and even my colleagues. In what we are doing, we're making a difference, believe me. What you are saying, what you have said, the questions they keep on asking, even being held accountable, it is making a difference. So if we continue this path, I'm not fatalistic in any sense. I'm very hopeful. I know for a fact that, God willing, this coming election will be, given what has happened in Kiamba, I think for me, there's a growth to an extent. It was very intense, but there was no violence. There was a lot of drama. At the end of the day, it was quite a spectacle. But at the end of the day, elections were held, and somebody won, somebody lost, and somebody else will go to court, like you said, they're supposed to go. Yeah. So if you go like that, believe me, I think it will be good. Thank you, Trevor, for having me.
All right. Steve?
I think what we need to remember is that the Constitution presupposes that its transformative superstructure will be implemented in the context of a marching culture of compliance. As a long-term project, we have to renovate our culture. As a short-term project, we have to strengthen our laws. That way, we may be able to move towards the target the Constitution had set for us.
All right. Thank you so much for making time this morning, Dr. Danvas Makori, NCIC Commissioner, Annie Rere, Chairperson, ELOG, and also Executive Director, FIDA, and Steve Ogola, Advocate with the High Court. Thank you for having this conversation. And it's time for Working Out. I'm taking a quick break. I see Willis Bazu is already here. Yes, he's already jogging. See if he has his tracks on. It's time to work out. See you in a bit.